All right, everybody, welcome to today's episode of McStay on What Matters. We are going to be talking about reality as it affects leadership, and I'm very happy today to be joined by Jason Donkersgoed. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Well, certainly looking forward to jumping into this conversation. You've got a lot of experience through your career in multiple different areas that I think is relevant to this topic. Before we do that, though, maybe introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you and what do you want people to know about you?
Sure. So I got started in leadership, way too many years ago, when I was a teenager. And I was in Air Cadets, and I remember vividly sitting in this classroom, and it had an old chalkboard, and they actually put up the Canadian Forces definition of leadership, and it just grabbed my attention. Probably at that time, for all the wrong reasons, it was ego based. And that kind of started my journey in leadership. And at a very young age, girlfriend and we ended up having a baby at age 18, and so I had to find my way through this career world to make sure that I could provide. And leadership was the way to do that. And so I had this crazy career that's spanned over 30 years of leading people in a bunch of different industries. And then just recently transitioned into full-time coaching and consulting.
Awesome. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. So you kind of started off from what I've seen in retail. You worked in banking, finance. You worked in the academic world as well. So obviously a lot of exposure to different leaders throughout those phases, I'm sure, and throughout the different companies you worked for. Can you think of any topics, like any leaders that really stand to mind that you were, when you saw them and how they operated, you were like, that's something I want to pick up on. That's something I want to try to mimic.
Yeah, for sure. So probably the boss that has had the most influence on me in my entire career, her name is Stacy, and I was working with her in finance, and a couple things really stand out. So the fact that she could make everybody feel seen and heard, no matter what. Like if you're having a conversation with Stacy, you feel like you're the only one in the room, which is a really, really good feeling, right? The other thing, she really gave me the gift of belief in self. So she was always able to show more belief in me than I had at the time, which then allows you to actually grow into all that you can actually be, right? So she really stands out as a phenomenal leader.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely nice when you run into somebody like that and you can kind of learn from them. You went in finance, you worked in the academic world for a while, and then now, like you said, full-time coaching. What drew you to full-time coaching as your next step?
Yeah, so I was fortunate that when I was in higher ed, I actually worked with the team there to create a coaching education program. So we educated folks that are wanting to become coaches into becoming coaches. And so I had first row seats into the power of coaching and the joy of coaching. And all that it could do. But I also was able to be a practitioner in that role. So I got to coach during that role. And there's no better feeling in the world than helping people kind of achieve the thing that's deeply seated within them that they want to achieve. It's just a beautiful thing to be part of that growth in another human being.
That's fantastic. So coaching wise, you obviously work with all sorts of different people, lots of leaders in business and different areas, I would imagine as well. When we kind of shift our focus back to talking about reality, this topic of reality and leadership. And so for the listeners, reality for me and leadership is you can't lead what you won't name. So what you won't identify as a challenge or a possible benefit, any of that type of stuff. If you're not aware of it, you won't name it, it's very hard to lead it. When you think about reality from a leadership lens, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah. So first off, I'll take a half a step back, and I always look at leadership through kind of three frames. So leading self or relationship with self, leading others, relationship with others, and leading systems or relationship with the systems we're part of. And so when you think of this topic of reality, it all begins first and foremost with leading self. And there's a lot more to that than meets the eye. I mean, first off, we're emotional beings. We have lived experiences throughout our life that create these lenses that we look at the world through, right? And so I would say for years and years and years, I truly believed that my reality was accurate. I think I'm coming to understand and believe now that our reality is our reality only through our lenses, and it takes interacting with other people in order to actually expand the reality to a fuller picture of what is, right? So I think that's where I would begin this whole reality conversation is, hey, what are my lived experiences? What's the identity I'm looking at this through? What are the values that I'm looking at this through? And then we can begin to expand that to our relationship with others. And that's kind of like, hey, are we asking questions? Are we curious about their lived experiences and how they see this same situation that we're experiencing? And then we can expand it one further to, well, what are all the systems at play here? And what's the interconnectedness between these systems? And when we look at this situation through all of the various systems we're part of, what do we see, right? So way more complex than what meets the eye.
Okay. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I think that's a good kicking off point for this as well. I find that a lot of times not recognizing or accepting the reality of situations comes down to a fear of or wanting to avoid discomfort, both for yourself and then also causing other people discomfort. When you run into that type of a situation with the people you're coaching, how do you help them get past that barrier?
Yeah, so as I'm coaching, I'm always thinking of it through multi-dimensional lenses. So first off, yeah, okay, maybe we touch on a subject and I just notice a shift in their seat, and I know there's some discomfort there. Well, we might ask, well, hey, what are the beliefs we're touching on here, right? And we might look at it through the lens of, hey, you just talked about this specific behavior that's happening. What if we look at it through that lens? Or, hey, this is within this structure or system. What if we look at it through that lens? Or, hey, you had this interpersonal response with somebody as we're having this conversation. What do we look at that? So really, the starting place is understanding that everything is multidimensional, and we kind of have to cue in on where's the best place to explore that fear or that reaction that they're having, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that definitely, I think one of the challenges people run into is, especially earlier in their leadership career, they have a certain framework that they see the world through, and that's how they experience, their day to day life. And they aren't always necessarily cognizant of the fact that other people might have a completely different framework. And what might be easy for you is not so easy for them, and what you think is going to be a big deal isn't for them. How do you encourage people to kind of look through the eyes of the people that they're leading and that they're working with, that maybe someone who looks at something through an entirely different framework?
Yeah, and I would say that's a really big part of coaching in general is to help people take a peek through different perspectives. So perspective taking is a big part of coaching. And so as an example, earlier this week I was working with somebody, and we were working through something around a career transition conversation. And I simply asked them at one point while we were kind of having the conversation, who's somebody you would really, really listen to on this topic? And they brought somebody to mind. And I just simply said, if that person was looking at this, what would they see? Right. And so it just helped them all of a sudden go, oh, they would actually give me a kick in the butt and they would tell me I'm being silly in this moment. Right. So, perspective taking is a really powerful thing, and we can do that in many ways. I love, and I can't think of her name right now, but she's the CEO of a large restaurant chain in the USA. And she had this concept that she would regularly use, which was called the hot shot rule. And the hotshot rule is simply this: if somebody jumped into your role right now and they were the best of the best in the industry of that, what would they see that you're not seeing? Right? So another way of perspective taking. Now, when it comes to managing team, I would say the key ingredient in perspective taking is empathy. So, are you slowing it down enough to actually listen to your team and try to understand what they're experiencing and coming alongside them, right? To really understand their experience as opposed to your experience.
Yeah. Well, I think an empathy is a very interesting topic too, because quite often I've seen leaders that feel that they're being very empathetic by not mentioning certain things because they don't want to upset somebody. They don't want to cause them, stress, and like an avoided reality doesn't go away. It just becomes harder or more expensive later on. Um, Empathy, how do you work with your people you're coaching to know that empathy doesn't always just mean being the good guy?
So from my perspective, the quote that I come back to over and over and over again is from Brené Brown, and it's as simple as this: clear is kind. And very often we trick ourselves into believing that, maybe not surfacing that reality that might create a little bit of pain for somebody is being kind. It's anything but being kind, because we're actually avoiding the situation and it's going to turn into something bigger and bigger and bigger until it explodes. And then there's all kinds of terrible outcomes because of that. So the clearest thing we can do is to actually have those courageous conversations as quickly as humanly possible. And as human beings, we do fear conflict in a lot of cases, and we view it as conflict. And we have to really understand, what is our relationship with conflict? What are our beliefs around conflict? What are our lived experiences around conflict? And how can we make friends with a new version of conflict that's healthy and comfortable and kind and generous and coming from a place of love, so that it's helping the situation in every case.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think constructive criticism, constructive conflict, maybe even, is a big part of the relationship that needs to happen between a person who is being led and the person that is leading them. When you're working with maybe younger leaders who are a little bit earlier in their career, what are some of the biggest blind spots that you see around empathy and around conflict management that they come into their new position with?
Yeah, very often leaders in general are promoted because they have done a great job. And when you've done a great job, you wear how you did that great job as a badge of honor, right? And so creating the capacity to understand that not everything is black and white. It's not like my way is the only way that should work and their way is not the right way. We actually have to take a look at the grays in the world and understand that there are probably many ways to get anything done. And while this might be the way that you did it, maybe the other person is doing it in a way that in the long run is going to be better for the organization. So just slow down, allow them to try things on for size, create the space, see what happens, and be able to just manage yourself in those moments where you're like, but I would do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think actually I just made a post about it on my LinkedIn recently that, it's as a leader, it's easier to jump in and do stuff than it is to help somebody else figure out how to do it. And we have to fight that instinct that, our way is the best way, like you said, or that, we know how to do it. So why don't we just get it done? It's faster, because that's not leadership. That's just you operating. That mindset shift from operator to leader of people is often very challenging for people. And I think this concept of reality and kind of looking at the frame that they're approaching a situation from is equally important on the self level, like you were mentioning earlier. when people are really struggling with that, maybe it's ego, maybe it's their experience, how do you help them break through to kind of understand that, self is very different from the person that they're leading?
Yeah. Yeah. So lots of times I'll playfully, especially if somebody has kids, I'll playfully bring their kids into the scenario and say, hey, listen, if somebody was managing your kid like you're managing your employees, what would you have to say to them? And they're like, yeah, that probably wouldn't be great. I'd rather have them come alongside. I'd rather have them train. I'd rather have them, give my kid the chance to try these things on for size for themselves, right? So, it's just creating awareness of the drawback of what's happening, and the pattern, and when you're stepping in and what that's giving you, and understanding the cost of it as well. So it's just exploring it through really deep conversation, and then going, okay, what's the intervention? How are you going to change this behavior?
So, from your experience, where do leaders most often try to avoid reality?
Yeah, so typically it's in the feedback mechanism. So it is that fear of disappointing another human being, that fear of conflict. Yeah, and everybody has a different interpretation of what's happening in that moment in their mind. But you've taken a look at a situation. Maybe you've gathered information from 14 different employees. The reality is fairly accurate, that maybe this person is not quite living up to the expectations, but you're afraid to bring it up and have the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I think that that's definitely a difficult thing, especially for earlier leaders, but could be difficult for anybody. You do some facilitation as well in your coaching practice. What's the impact that you've seen on groups when a leader or the leader of the group names a difficult reality?
Yeah.
What do you see? What kind of impact do you see that have?
Yeah, so the very first thing that happens, and I always find this fascinating, is each individual in the room typically thinks they're the only one experiencing whatever was just named. And all of a sudden it's named, and there's this collective sigh of relief in the room. Okay, I'm not alone anymore, right? And there's so much power in a group feeling that they're no longer alone. I'm not the only one that's experiencing this. There's a common experience here, right? And then from there, typically the conversation can move to a new place, which is oftentimes, okay, how are we going to solution for this? Like, what are the possibilities on a go forward basis, right? But yeah, it's almost always collective relief.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, that kind of comes to the flip side of that is, what from your experiences can be the cost when a leader is avoiding reality or avoiding even just naming reality?
Yeah. Years ago, I was working at an organization, and we're going through massive restructure, and it wasn't going the way that it should have been going, and uh, you know, people were kind of screaming at the top of the lungs that it wasn't going the way it should be going, and the leader was fairly oblivious to this within the organization, and would come on to these calls and start talking about the concert they had attended the last weekend, wearing the concert T-shirt, and I'll tell you, like, it absolutely deflated like all enthusiasm for the organization in that moment. Like, everybody was just like, "Oh my goodness, this person does not understand what we're going through," and because of that, there was so much tension, so much pushback against absolutely everything that was going on at the time. So the cost was real, and in that scenario, if that leader had only just paid attention to, hey, you guys are having an experience, and I recognize that, and it's a collective experience, everybody would have felt held within that, and because of that, they would have probably come together and try to be more of part of the solution, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that feeling like your leader doesn't understand the challenges that you're facing, the things that you're going through, or just even won't recognize them, is definitely one of the fastest ways to making a team feel very disengaged and very separated from the success of the company. Um, I guess on the flip side to that, something that I've seen leaders struggle with is balancing transparency and oversharing. Because as a leader, obviously, you have access to a lot of information that may or may not be relevant for your team. It may or may not be the right time to be sharing that with your team. Have you had any clients that have struggled with that kind of, how do I have this relationship? And I tell them the important stuff, but I hold back the things that they don't need yet. But but I'm not being truthful with them. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, I personally experienced that dozens of times in my career. And it's an incredibly tough thing to reconcile in your own mind, right? And what I would say is that what's needed in those moments is a clear change management plan, right? Go back to okay, are we following the tenets of good change management? And do we have a plan? And if there's not a plan and you're a leader in the organization, how can you help everybody recognize that, hey, this is going to go much better with an active plan, right? Because in the absence of a plan, then the leader, especially middle management, are going to be in the middle of these two things, and there's always going to be tension there. But at the end of the day, a leader does have, some duty of care to both parties, right? So to the organization and what is public and what is not public at the moment, you have to hold that very carefully. And then to your team, to making sure that they're navigating ambiguity in the best way humanly possible. It's a dance, though. It's not like I don't know if there's a perfect answer ever. It will always be a dance.
Yeah, well, and it's so much comes down to timing and different relationships you have, different characteristics of different people within the team. It's a difficult topic for a lot of people to go through. When we're looking at kind of that communication topic, kind of having a shared reality with the people that we're leading, what are some signs that a leader can look for that maybe signals to them that like reality is being avoided?
Yeah. So if you're in meetings and a decision is made in a meeting, and then there's a whole bunch of conversation about the decision after the meeting, chances are we're not talking about the right things, right? Or we don't have the level of trust necessary within the organization. The other thing, I'm always thinking about is, one of the practices of leadership is facilitation. And so, how are you facilitating conversations matters a great deal. But if you're in a meeting and there's almost dead silence within the team, that's a pretty good sign that there's some sort of elephant in the room that needs to be surfaced, right? So if typically the team is fairly talkative and there's a lot less talk all of a sudden, yeah, that's a pretty good sign. If there's all of a sudden a whole bunch of little cliques within an organization, that's a pretty good sign. So, just looking out for kind of where those energy pockets are at any given time, to kind of go, okay, you know what, we should be surfacing. In an ideal world, we should be proactively always surfacing the elephants in the room.
We all know that the typical joke, like, a leader goes, how's everything going today? Good. Anything that is wrong? Nope, everything's great. It's difficult for people who are being led to always feel like they can bring everything up. They don't want to complain. They don't want to try and push stuff uphill. What are some ways that you coach your leaders to draw that out from people?
Yeah. So again, facilitation as a leadership practice would say that, in your meetings, you want to have multiple ways that people can actually communicate. You want to identify the reality that each person communicates differently. So very often we run meetings like, okay, who has an opinion on this? And then the one person who's bold puts up their hand and says a bunch of stuff. And meanwhile, there's four people that never speak up in a meeting. So simple little facilitation techniques like, okay, here's the question that we're going to talk about. I want everybody just to jot down 3 points about this question, and then we'll begin the discussion after we've had some time to think, right? Or meeting briefs or issue briefs where, okay, this is the issue we're going to tackle. Here's a brief so that you can think about it ahead of time. Come to us with a few questions, right? So that's a terrific thing. The other thing, sometimes what we'll do is we'll actually implant somebody to add an opposing view on purpose, and we name it within the room. So we'll actually say, okay, your job is to actually surface a different perspective, to argue the opposite way of whatever the collective room is. And that will often surface new things all the time. The reality, though, if we take a step back, is we're talking about the ability to build psychological safety and trust, right? Because if you have strong psychological safety and you have high trust, then likely you can have healthy conflict on a regular basis and surface those elephants or those realities very easily. So you have to step back and go, hey, what does it look like to build good psychological safety and trust? My favorite resource on trust by a long shot is a beautiful little TED talk from Dr. Frances Frey called How to Build and Rebuild Trust. And she goes through the three key components of trust, which are authenticity, empathy, and logic. And she goes through it in a really meaningful way. And so just thinking about, how are we building trust within your part of the organization on a day-to-day basis is probably the starting point, right?
That's fantastic. Talking about resources, what other resources would you suggest for leaders if they're, seeing if they're recognizing, they're listening right now, and they know that there's some realities that are being avoided by themselves or by their team? Any other resources, books, TED Talks,
Yeah,
etc.?
I really, really like Lencioni's work on the five behaviors. And he kind of shows them in a pyramid, and the bottom is trust. The second is healthy conflict. If you have those two, then you can create commitment. And if you have that, then you can create accountability. And if you have that, then you can create results. So it really helps me kind of begin to understand with whoever I'm sitting in front of, okay, can we isolate the inability to surface reality to where it is? And most often it's going to be in trust. He actually talks a lot about the difference between basic tactical trust and vulnerability based trust. Tactical trust is, hey, I understand that this person is going to do XYZ, and we earn that every single day by kind of living up to our commitments. Vulnerability trust is, hey, I feel safe enough to actually speak up in this moment, right? Very different.
Yeah. So I think if we try and tie it all together as we get towards the end of the episode, reality, as we talked about off the top, naming reality, understanding the reality that you're facing in your teams or with your leadership style, you're doing a service to yourself, you're doing a service to your team, and you're doing a service to the systems that are in place that you're trying to improve. If you had kind of one final thing that you wish all of the leaders that you've worked with would understand kind of on this topic, what would that be for you?
Stay curious for just a little bit longer. Um, this world asks of leaders very often to reduce everything to a decision as quickly as humanly possible, and that actually does not allow us to really do the sense finding that's necessary to surface the reality. And very often, when we make decisions too quickly, we actually create unintended consequences. So just stay curious for a little bit longer. Ask those extra 2, 3, 4 questions. Get feedback from a couple more people so that you can really understand the reality before solutioning for the reality.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it off. Jason, thanks so much for being on the show today. For everyone watching, going to have links to Jason and all the stuff that he's doing in the description down below. This is Sean McStay. Until next time, focus on what matters. Thanks.